That week was very hard for Kevin. It was primarily because he had to defend his thesis and take final exams at the Boston University School of Law. Kevin knew that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes, so he put in a lot of effort to excel in his exams. Mom will be so happy. She dreamed about it for so long, the law school graduate thought with a smile. Before enrolling in university, he had served in the Marine Corps, which helped him get into the law program. Penelope Thompson loved her son and had raised him on her own since he was 10, which was when her husband's life was tragically cut short in a car accident. It was Penelope who insisted that Kevin pursue higher education after finishing high school. However, Kevin wanted to test his abilities in the military before focusing on his education. Mrs. Thompson saw her son's potential and was confident that he would have a bright and successful future. Unfortunately, Kevin was so busy with school lately that he'd barely ever had time to visit his mother. He was born in a small town in southern Massachusetts and saw Boston as the center of the universe. Penelope understood that her son was going through a lot, so she never pressured him into frequent visits. Of course, Kevin felt guilty about it, but he prioritized his education nonetheless. It was only after successfully defending his thesis that he could finally feel a sense of freedom. It was then that he got the idea to pay his mother a surprise visit. Why not? I'll come back home unannounced with a diploma in my hand, like a real lawyer. The recent graduate liked the idea so much that he fully got engrossed in planning the visit. To ensure that his mother wouldn't suspect anything, Kevin turned off his phone 2 days before the trip. Who knows, Mom could decide to call and check on me. What kind of surprise would that be? He chuckled to himself. The journey home took Kevin several hours, and he didn't arrive in his hometown until evening. He was very excited and couldn't stop smiling all the way over. Kevin couldn't wait to get home and show his mother his diploma that would grant him the right to work as a lawyer at any financial institution in the city. As he approached his home, Kevin picked up the pace, barely managing to restrain himself from breaking into a run. But when he reached the porch and knocked on the door, he made an unsettling discovery. The door was locked and the blinds of the windows were drawn. Kevin knew that his mother had never kept the blinds down because she always craved warmth and sunlight, and the door was always unlocked. It was strange. He hesitated for a moment, then knocked on the door again. Kevin didn't have his own key because his mother had recently changed the locks and hadn't had a chance to give him a new key set. Growing impatient and concerned, Kevin decided to call his mother on his phone. But that didn't help either. His mother's phone was silent, or rather, the different voice of the operator informed him that the subscriber was out of the network range. This is so strange. Mom never turns off her phone, Kevin thought, getting more and more worried. At that moment, a young woman in her 20s stepped outside from the neighboring house. She looked at Kevin with a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Her judgmental gaze sent shivers down Kevin's spine. His mother had told Kevin that a young woman and her parents had recently moved in next door, but he had never met the woman personally. "Good evening, miss. I'm sorry. Do you happen to know Penelope Thompson? Is she home?" Kevin asked, trying to contain his excitement. The neighbor hesitated for a moment and then suddenly covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Kevin approached her, not knowing what to say. However, the stranger initiated the conversation. "I'm sorry, you don't know, do you? Mrs. Thompson passed away 2 days ago. She was buried yesterday. We tried to reach you, but couldn't get through." Kevin's head was spinning from everything he had just heard. Just yesterday, he was planning a surprise visit for his mother, and today, he learned that she was no longer alive. Tears welled up in Kevin's eyes. The joy he felt from his graduation was replaced with bitter sadness over losing the most important person in his life. "How did it happen?" he asked in a trembling voice. The neighbor turned pale but answered his question nonetheless. "A heart attack. Mrs. Thompson had been complaining of chest pain lately, but she didn't want to see a doctor. She was waiting for you, hoping you'd come." At that moment, Kevin felt very guilty. By devoting all of his energy to his studies, he had virtually stopped caring for his mother, who was waiting for help from her only son. His belated remorse, combined with an overwhelming sense of guilt, left Kevin demoralized, making it difficult for him to think straight. If you want, you could visit your mother's grave. She was buried next to your father. I'm April, by the way. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need help. It won't be a problem for me. Oh, and here's a key," the neighbor added, then walked away. She understood that Kevin needed some time alone to process the news. Kevin stood on the porch, still in disbelief about what had happened. Just yesterday, his life was full of opportunities and colors, and now it had turned into a gray and desolate existence. Despite the fact that it was already getting dark, Kevin decided to visit his mother's grave right away. Mrs. Thompson was buried next to her husband, and Kevin knew the location well. It was situated right by the entrance, a few yards from the gate. Kevin was never superstitious. He believed that one should fear the living, not the dead. So he didn't hesitate to go to the cemetery during the dark hours. Of course, at this time of day, it looked very unpleasant and even somewhat eerie. But Kevin paid no attention to it. All he wanted to do was kneel at his mother's grave and ask for her forgiveness. However, as Kevin approached the fresh grave mound, he heard a strange squeaking sound, vaguely reminiscent of either a sigh or a muffled moan. He froze. His heart was pounding so loud that he felt uncomfortable. He didn't believe in the supernatural, so he was sure that such sounds could only come from a living creature. Then he heard the mysterious sound again, but this time Kevin could pinpoint its source. There could be no mistake. It was coming from his mother's grave. He approached it cautiously, and as he leaned over the fresh earth, he saw a strange bundle, about 1.5 feet in size, or perhaps a little larger. "What on earth is this?" he whispered, shivering with fear. The thing was that the bundle was moving slightly, which sent a shiver of terror down his spine. However, when Kevin summoned the courage to pick it up, he discovered that it was a swaddled baby. Feeling the warmth of Kevin's hands, the baby perked up noticeably and began to fuss. Clutching this precious find, Kevin hurried towards the exit. At that moment, all he could think about was saving the baby. All other thoughts, including his sorrow for his departed mother, faded into the background. However, instead of going home, Kevin immediately went to see April, believing that she would know what to do in this situation. Seeing Kevin at her doorstep with the baby in his arms, April froze. She had been in a similar situation before, so it took her some time to understand what was going on. Seeing the hesitancy and suspicion in her eyes, Kevin quickly said, "Please help me. I found this baby in the city cemetery. I don't know how or why it ended up there, but I really need your help." His neighbor's words had an effect of a cold shower on April. She took the baby in her arms and went into her bedroom to change his diaper. As it turned out, April did have some experience in this matter. It was mainly because her older sister had recently had a baby. Thus, April often took care of her niece while the baby's mother stepped away to run errands. While April was taking care of the baby, Kevin went to the nearest pharmacy to buy baby formula. He realized that the baby was probably very hungry, so he couldn't afford to waste any time. Fortunately, luck was on his side that day. He quickly purchased the formula and a pack of diapers and ran back. April was waiting for him with the baby in her arms. She prepared the formula and started feeding the baby, but she asked Kevin to check the baby's blanket in the meantime. "Is there any reason why I need to do this? It's just a regular blanket, isn't it?" Kevin asked. However, when Kevin unfolded the blanket, he immediately understood what April was talking about. He found a rolled-up note with an address written on it. It made Kevin think that it was directly related to the baby he found. Since it was already late, Kevin decided not to do anything about it right away and planned to visit the address in the morning. Exhausted from the day's events, he fell asleep on the couch in April's living room without even changing his clothes. His neighbor was understanding and made sure he had a peaceful night. Satisfied after being fed, the baby fell into a deep sleep, reassuring April that he was in good health. The next morning, Kevin woke up at dawn. After hastily drinking a cup of coffee made by April, he headed to the address written on the note. Even from a distance, Kevin could tell that wealthy people lived there. A 3-story mansion with a terrace, tennis court, and a huge swimming pool spoke volumes. Timidly glancing around, Kevin approached the front door and rang the doorbell. He immediately heard someone's footsteps on the other side of the door. which was later opened by a tall man in his 30s dressed in a bathrobe. "Is something wrong? Who are you, a courier or a negotiator? Do you have news about our son?" The homeowner began bombarding Kevin with questions. At that moment, Kevin realized that the man standing before him was most likely the baby's father. When he saw the figure of the man's wife behind him, everything fell into place. As Kevin would later find out, the missing baby's name was Josh Miller. He had been kidnapped 3 days ago with the intention of demanding a ransom. Negotiations had lasted for about 2 days, but had ultimately led nowhere. Albert Miller was willing to pay any amount to save his son, and he had made that very clear during the negotiations. However, the kidnappers didn't believe him for some reason and decided to terminate all communications with the child's parents. Having learned that Kevin had found their son, Albert and Diana Miller were ready to literally carry him on their shoulders. Never before had Kevin experienced such emotional uplift, brought about by the feeling that he did the right thing. Thankfully, being still very young, little Josh didn't even realize that he'd been kidnapped and treated the whole experience as a small adventure. Meanwhile, Albert Miller expressed his gratitude to Kevin in the most generous way possible by hiring him as the lead attorney in one of his firms. Now, Kevin was able to get such extensive experience that he was confident that his path to career success was clear. However, that wasn't the only reason why the kidnapping case left an incredible mark on Kevin. There was another circumstance that eclipsed even his career achievements. Kevin fell in love. And not with just anyone, but his neighbor, April, with whom he had rescued little Josh. After everything they'd been through, they started dating and quickly developed a deep mutual affection. Following a whirlwind romance, Kevin and April tied the knot just half a year later. Some people speculated that their haste was due to April's pregnancy. There's no way to say whether it was true or not, but judging by the joyful look in Kevin's eyes, the rumors about April's pregnancy were probably not unfounded. Every Sunday, Kevin came to his mother's grave to ask for forgiveness. In those moments, the sun would invariably appear in the sky, and its warm rays would brush against Kevin's cheeks as if to convey the message that Mrs. Thompson had long forgiven her son.